Hi, Sven here. It's only been 2 weeks since I released my agent system in a video, my agent system based on Make, but still without these Make agents where you can now actually see this new module. Instead, it was based on a ChatGPT assistant that I specifically built for this purpose. And in that video, I showed how this assistant, this orchestrator, is actually capable of conducting a dialogue with a human, calling up the right tools, and so on. Now, Make has released the new Make agents, the powerful tool you can see here called Make AI agents, and I've now gotten access to it in the beta phase. So I simply copied my scenario, or rather an entire agent system. It was actually 4 scenarios from that old video, and swapped out the elements that have changed, but otherwise it has remained more or less identical. And that's the cool thing about it. If you watch both videos, you can compare how the approach and the actual functionality differ. Yes, you can find the old video on our channel as always, and you can watch it directly to see what the difference is. But I'd also like to briefly demonstrate to you right now where the changes actually are. I am Sven, I am an entrepreneur. I've been involved in process optimization and quality for over 33 years, not just in a business context, but in all areas of life. And much of what I know today, I've learned through experience and trial and error, and I know what really works. And in my videos, I want to show you how you can use intelligent process automation profitably for yourself and your business, and share everything I've learned. So let's get started. In my new scenarios, I've simply copied the various workflows from the old scenarios to show you the differences first. It all starts with the fact that I'm doing everything via Slack. That means I have a Slack channel where I post a message, the message is processed by the agent, and then there's a response here. It looked exactly the same in the old scenario. I posted the message in Slack, then the agent processed it and provided the response. But here, there are 2 other modules, namely a data storage module, which I use to keep track of the context. That is the thread ID, which is necessary so that all the tools and the agent itself can access previous information and the previous dialogue. In the new version, this is no longer necessary, but we'll see that in a moment. So I'll just go ahead and delete this here again. The second scenario we're dealing with is a tool that allows me to simply have a LinkedIn post written for me on a specific topic. And here again, we see that this tool was in fact called by the old orchestrator via a webhook, and then it delivers back the text generated by ChatGPT here as part of the process through a webhook response. The whole thing now looks different in the new version. Instead of a webhook, which is probably also a kind of webhook, this dynamic start is called here. And then the result is returned with this return post text, similar to the webhook response. We can also delete this now, and then we'll take a look at the next scenario. This scenario is about generating an image with Flux. Here you can see the original again, webhook call, webhook end, and without a webhook call, hence this dynamic start. The return output is therefore identical, and the only change here is that I don't need these variables anymore because I solved it a little differently, but that's not relevant. Just imagine this part here is gone, then it looks exactly the same again. So we'll delete this as well. And finally, we have the post here, and it also looks identical again, called via a webhook, or here through the dynamic access. 2 returns, one for the text post, one for my text with image post, and the whole thing here via a webhook. So you see, the scenarios are identical, the story is identical. And here's how it works. In my Slack channel, I actually have the option to communicate directly with the agent. Basically, just by simply saying that I would like a LinkedIn post on a certain topic, and then a dialogue starts. That means it doesn't just follow a strictly defined automation. It's a bit more flexible. It's not so process-oriented, but rather goal-oriented, because the goal is, I want you, dear agent system, to support me as a user with my social media topics. And this whole thing here is a very, very simple scenario because it's just about creating images for LinkedIn posts and posting them on LinkedIn. But of course, this can be expanded as much as you like. If I then add a Facebook tool, I can also post it on Facebook and do much more. So how is the whole thing structured? The entire system is based on the Run an Agent module. And when I click on the module here, I get a dialog that we haven't seen in this form in Make before. And up here, you can also see that it's in beta. And today I've already seen on social media platforms that there's a really interesting exchange going on. And there's clear information that this system will be significantly further developed in the coming weeks. But in any case, it's already available, which is pretty cool. And I can already say that it works quite well. I have this agent up here in the selection, which means there could, of course, be several agents here. I'll get to the configuration in a moment. And now several tools are being assigned to this agent. And these tools are all separate scenarios. And these scenarios need to have certain properties. So they need to have this on-demand call symbol. That means they are not triggered by a schedule, but rather on demand. And in principle, that's basically like a kind of webhook. I can also call them directly from here again. And logically, they also need to be active. Otherwise, they obviously can't work. Here I can add more such tools. That means what you could do here is once I have defined this agent, for example, I have these 3 tools included. Let's say these are always included. And now I have a situation where I say I'm using this agent in another scenario, and then it also has the same tools here, but I can now add additional tools that only apply to this specific scenario. I think that's a pretty cool story. It's kind of like an inheritance mechanism. This thread ID is now the alternative to what I used to have with the meta storage. We have to somehow provide the agent and also the tools beneath it with the information about what was previously discussed. What was the previous context? And this context, if I think about Slack, for example, is basically the entire thread, which consists of a message and the replies to it. And here it's very important, or at least it seems logical to me, that if I send a message, then get a reply, and then reply to that reply, that's a thread. But if I send a new message again tomorrow, then that new message is once again a different context. And that's why using this thread ID is actually a pretty cool thing. In Slack, there's what's called a timestamp. And the timestamp is basically something that's attached to a message, so to speak, indicating exactly when that message was sent. That means a message has a timestamp, which uniquely identifies it. And the thread timestamp is in a way the parent message when you're in a reply. That's why I say here, if there isn't a parent message yet, then use the timestamp as the thread ID. And the next time, since this entry already exists, you just use the parent. In these additional system instructions, similar to how I have additional tools up here, I can now add extra information here as well, which will then be merged with the actual system prompt. And in this case, I only have one thing, namely this message that was entered here in Slack, which I now pass on to the agent. And this, for example, is also a very important aspect, synchronous or asynchronous. If you have an agent system here that actually runs for a long time, for example, because there are many tools underneath and they are called one after another, then it says here that if it takes 3 minutes or longer, you should actually let the scenario continue running and then somehow receive the answer via a webhook, indicating that the response is available and that it is now finished. So in my case, I wait until the agent is finished and then report back. And in the end, it simply delivers the response from the tools it called. And I then send that as a reply in the Slack channel. But let's take a look at the configuration of this agent. I'll click on configuration here. And now we can see the complete configuration of such an agent. That means I have the system prompt here. And if you compare it to what I did 2 weeks ago in another video, it's more or less identical. And this time I just did it more or less intuitively. So again, I wrote here personal social media assistant. Your main task is to guide the user through this process. And now, of course, I had to make a change here, namely that's where the workflow comes in. And now the workflow looks like this. So when the user clicks a certain button, the agent LinkedIn copywriter should be called. And that's why it also makes a lot of sense to give these agents, these tools, a clear and distinct name so that the system understands exactly which of these tools should be activated. If you experiment with it a bit more, it might turn out that you don't have to specify it quite so precisely. But well, an agent does need a clear goal so that it doesn't do anything nonsensical. And that's why I thought it's probably better to name it very specifically. Then, for example, I also told it, well, then return the text, ask for feedback, and if the user is satisfied with it, then ask for an image. If an image is requested, then call the image generator and later for the post, the LinkedIn post. And do you want anything else? Well, and then there's another very important point here. If the user is looking for something that has nothing to do with this, then please try to handle it yourself and don't try to find a tool that you don't even have. Yes, and then there are a few other instructions here. For example, always check first if there is a tool available. If there isn't one, then try to solve it yourself. Then the tools are listed here. That means if I were to add the Facebook agent now, as I mentioned earlier, oh, I see, there's actually an underscore missing in the name. Then I would just go ahead and add it right here, just like this. Well, and then it also gets the instruction that the user could start somewhere else with their questions. And that's exactly the crucial point. It's not a process that goes from step 1 to step N, but rather it's a relatively open dialogue. And here I'm trying to teach the agent orchestrator how to handle such open communication. So I add the tools here, and now let's take a look at what else is in the agent settings. This is also quite important because now I can select the different providers here. So I can only do this once, but you can imagine that Gemini is now included there and so on, and then the different models. Although 4.1 was released this morning, it's not included here yet. So obviously this needs to be added by make, because in the normal scenarios, I can already select 4.1. Then I give the thing a name, then I specify how many tokens, and I'm not entirely sure what exactly is meant by this recursion limit. I assume it's so that it doesn't stay in a loop forever, jumping from one tool to the next and then back to the first and so on, so that it somehow eventually gets out of it. Yes, and this history count here too, I assume it's about making sure that everything that actually happened in the previous calls can still be used. But I'm not entirely sure about that. Maybe I need to read the documentation again, so that means I'll save it again now. I just made a small change there, and then we'll take a look at the other tools. Yes, and if we go in here now, I can see this right LinkedIn post, which is then in this setting here. It is set to on demand, and then it gets this symbol here. And now the question is, how does it get the information? Yes, you can already see it. Look here, I've already got 4.1 in there. How does it get its information now? Because normally the way I work with a system like this is that I give it its prompt here, and then at some point I say, look, this is your topic that you should work on, and I've already prepared this for you. Up here it says you will receive a topic for LinkedIn post, and then in this message 3 I now say topic equals. So now where does this topic come from? And it works like this. You might already know this. When you use on demand, there's this new icon down here, and these are the so-called scenario inputs. And now outputs have been added as well, and we need those in order to be able to deliver a result at the end. So if I click on this here, you can see, hang on, I need to move myself to the side for a better view, that you can actually add as many different inputs as you want here. And if you take a look at them, each one has its own unique name. Then you have to describe here what it is so that the system can somehow understand it. I could imagine that maybe I don't have to pass it directly, but I don't want to experiment with that right now. First of all, the type is text. Does it have a default value? No. Is it required? Yes. And it is closed. And is it multi-line? No, not that either. And now, of course, I could add more elements here, and now this information is passed from the agent orchestrator to this scenario. And it works the same way with the outputs. In this case, the output is a post text, which is created here by JGT. That means I give it a name again, then I indicate that this is the post text that was generated. Again, it's text. Then that's it. Again, what type is it? Is it a default value? And in this case, multi-line would theoretically even have to be yes. So, and when I save this, these elements then appear in the modules when selecting variables. So if I now go back into my prepared message here, then I click on these curly brackets, and here you can now see the scenario inputs. And now I can add this input, this variable right here. Then I save the whole thing, and with that, I'm basically done. And let's also take a look at this return output. Well, this return output will now automatically, the output items that I entered here, namely this post text, will automatically be displayed in this dialog. And then I can specify what goes in here. Well, and here it's simply the result from this ChatGPT module. So let's save the whole thing. Then we go to the image generator. Same procedure as before. I have a ChatGPT module here that does nothing other than its task. It's supposed to generate an image for a given text, which in this case is the post text. And down here, I've already prepared it. The text for the image is already entered here. That means here, basically, there's just this one text, then an image is generated, and then with Flux, this image is created. I've set the Flux API key here via the variables. That means I don't have to enter it manually every time. And then I create the prompt here, 16:9 format, output as JPEG. And then here at the end, in the response, I return the URL that was determined by this getResult module. And last but not least, the third case, our post tool. I start with a router, and it's really cool that it works exactly like that. That means I can also tell the router to start on demand, because here I want to make a distinction. Do you have just a text post, or do you have text and an image? If it's an image, download the picture and then post it on LinkedIn. And yes, and then I return that here. So let's take another quick look at this. For download image, I then have the post image URL. So now I have two inputs, the URL and the post text, which I need down here. Well, and that's basically it. And then in both cases, I simply return the post ID that I get from the LinkedIn module. Yes, this agent, this personal social media agent, is now supposed to work with these tools. That means every time a message comes in on Slack, this message is then passed on to the agent. I also have a few filters in place here, namely that if the agent has already responded and that comes in as a new event in Slack, then it shouldn't respond to that again. Otherwise, it would end up in an infinite loop. And I also don't want any responses if a message is deleted, and if a message is edited, I don't want a response for now either. And then the agent runs, and in the end, the response is sent back to him in Slack. That means I go back into the same channel. Here, the response comes from the agent, and you'll also see these execution steps later. We'll take a look at that once we've run through everything. Then I use here again so in which thread should the response be posted? I don't want to broadcast, otherwise it would show up in the channel every single time. Well, and the rest of the settings are just the usual ones for Slack. So what does that mean now? That means if I now go into Slack and say, please create a post for me, then something should happen. And let's just try that out now. Since it's set to immediately, basically everything should already be taken care of. And then create a LinkedIn post for me on the topic of, well, AI agents. There we go. Enter. Now let's just wait a moment. In theory, a response should come in any second now. So here we have the response. Then I click here on the thread, which is on the right. So, and now we can see what happened here. So it now says Ira Picker, that's the name of our bot here. And what's interesting is this text here. This is the actual text that the LinkedIn post tool has generated. But this here is the response that comes from the agent, right? Who now actually says, look, here is the post. Are you satisfied? Should I adjust anything? Yes, and then I can, for example, say, I don't know, add a few more emojis. And now the agent is being called again, and theoretically it should come up with a new result, right? You see, how about these additions? Yes, and now we can already see here there are 1 or 2 emojis appearing. And then I say here, yes, I'm satisfied. Yes, great. Would you like? You like me to generate an image for this post? Yes, please. Please. I can't just write, please create an image for it. I probably should have just written yes, right? Maybe I can type better. And this is going to take a while now because it has to go into the Flux generator, and that takes about 10 seconds until the image is created. And yes, if I did everything correctly, you should now respond here with the URL. So, and here actually comes the image, which is now not only, here is the generated image, there's the link now. Are you satisfied, or should I create another one? And like before, I could of course say now, no, do it again, make another one. And then I say, yes, that's fine. Would you like? Do you think I'm publishing a post for you on LinkedIn now? Yes, please. Then I just need to quickly open my LinkedIn here. Your LinkedIn post has been published successfully. Would you like to post something else as well? Let's take a look. Refresh. Yes, and here's the post, right? Zach? Okay, I'll delete it right away now because I haven't even looked at the thing. So let's go into the history here and just see what happened. So now we can see here, April 15th, 2:26 p.m. So that's the first message. Let's take a look now. 2:26 p.m., 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 views in total. And then let's go into the details here and see what actually happened. Here, the agent was called. The message here should say, create the LinkedIn post for me. Yes, there it is already. So, and now let's go into the results here, namely the response. Here is the LinkedIn post. That's clear, we've seen that. Then we see the execution steps. So obviously it used 5 steps here. Let's take a look at the first one. So the system role, that's the specific role it actually received. Basically, it's the message that was given to it in this particular context, in this scenario. Step 2 was then the message, create a LinkedIn post for me on the topic of AI agents. That's the message it received here. Content. So, and now it realized, I need to call the LinkedIn copywriter agent. The topic is AI agents. Then we received the answer here, the tool response. Post text is the same. And then it processed that further, and in step 5, reported it back as the result, yes. That means you can also here, well, it's a bit tedious when you have to click through these different steps, but it's definitely already a really good approach because I can see in detail what the system did here. Let's take a look at the example with the image. That's probably this one here, because it also took 25 seconds, yes. You can see it here as well. Exactly. Messages. Create an image for it. So now let's go through the execution steps here as well. Wow, 13 steps. Okay, let's take a look. So let's take another detailed look at this. So again, the role. What is the task? He called up the LinkedIn copywriter again here. That's interesting. Okay, these are now all the messages that have been exchanged here. Okay, then these are probably also the individual elements he still needs to access. LinkedIn post, add a few. Okay, so now you can really see here quite nicely that the entire process, the whole workflow was used accordingly. create an image for it. Now it's becoming a bit clearer to me as well. Then the arguments. AI agents in a corporate environment that represent automation and efficiency. Okay. Yes. Okay, and then the response from the tool is just the URL, and I return that. Okay, so that means I can see here in these steps, I can actually see everything that happened completely. Yes, and that's how these make agents work. I'm definitely going to experiment and play around with this a lot more in the coming weeks, but I thought it would be pretty cool to share the first results and first impressions right at the start, as soon as they're available. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to work with agent systems like this yourself and maybe need some support, you can schedule a free call with me here. Otherwise, I'd appreciate your like, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video if you join me again. Bye.